Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are excited for those who are in the room with us to really talk about the importance of the upcoming LSC elections, to bring, really a space for, parents, community members, and all of those stakeholders who are interested in the upcoming elections to ask questions, to talk about the things that are important to you, the things that you're really concerned about. So we have a dynamic, panel discussion that we have planned, where we really just want folks to, engage with us, use the chat. If you're in Facebook, if you're in Twitter, or excuse me, if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, we can see those comments. We can see your questions as they populate. So throughout this hour that we're together, again, please engage with us. We're looking forward to your interactions. Again, amid COVID-19, there's a lot of concern around really to make sure that the elections are open, transparent, and really fair. And one of those, things that's really critically important for people who are connected to schools and in the community is really how they can safely vote, how they can make sure that their votes are going to be protected, because we know that there's a little bit of a hybrid voting opportunity this year, which is completely new. And so, again, this space is really for you, the public and the community, to make sure that we're on the same, page. So I'm excited about our panelists who are here with us this evening. Without further ado, I want to bring on Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, who has, over 20 years of experience being a LSC member. And quite honestly, I remember 2 years ago when I was running for LSC and nervous and didn't know what to do and what to think. It was a phone call with you that really helped put things into perspective as a parent rep. So I'm excited for you to be with us this evening. Please do what you do and sprinkle some knowledge on the people.
Thank you, Sister Natasha. Good evening, everybody. I am Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, and I have that privilege because constituents thought I would be there. But I started off at the age of 19 as a local school council member. I was a teen mom. My mother was a PTA mom. My mother was on one of the first LSCs. And so for me, I first thought it was a headache. I was like, because I didn't understand the politics and I hadn't got any proper training. So for me, I had to grow into it. If you love young people, you should get on the LSC. If you love making sure young people get educated, this is a place for you. If you love your community, this is a place for you. If you love the teaching profession and you like to see that, that teachers are teaching and that you can give them the space and help to do it, this is a position for you. LSCs are only special to Chicago. I don't think people realize that only in Chicago that we have local school councils. That's number one. Number two, local school councils are ran by parents and the community. Why do you think that there are 6 parent members and 2 community reps, 2 teachers and a principal? Because parents, I want you all to think about this, and I use this analogy all the time. If there were no young people in those buildings, what would happen? Absolutely nothing, because that's what the dollars are. And so you being on that LSC is very important. You got 3 responsibilities. One is to hire and fire the principal. One is to decide how discretionary funds is. One is to fundraise and help with the school and building its programs. Those are your prime responsibilities and duties. It is not glitter and gold, and it is not for the faint at heart. Because at the end of the day, you help make a decision of how those educational institutions are made. And we know that because of an institution that we all got to deal with, which is Chicago Public Schools, right now, a lot of our schools have a grenade thrown into them. They are in chaos. But the people who control and make that institution better and make it a safe space for young people and families are local school council members. This is not a space for you to go along and get along. Because as you see, you talk about high unemployment, you talk about young people dropping out, you talk about the educational system not being what it should be. That is on us, and that is one of your major responsibilities. Never forget that your job and responsibility is to work with that community, that school community. That is important. Get trained by a local organization. I became an LSC facilitator maybe 3 years ago, and I had to because I felt like when I did the training that CPS provided, I came out more confused than I went in. And so it's good to go to a local organization like Raise Your Hand. Coco does it. There are organizations around the city that do local school council trainings, and they give it to you in the gut because you need to understand that space you're in, and you need to understand their importance. A lot of you who are first time LSC members, don't worry, you'll get it right. Read the training manuals, but also talk to local school council members. Talk to parents in the building. It's your responsibility and your duty to do your due diligence. I was an LSC member for 22 years. And out of those 22 years, for 18 of those years, I was the chair. And it was not easy. I'm not going to tell you it was easy. It was not. But it was so worth it because I get to see a school that's not closed. I get to see a school that they were going to close and open back up with $14 million in investment in it. So don't tell me what local school councils can't do. And so just know I'm a phone call away. They'll be able to give you some of my contact information to get in contact with me because I have a wealth of information, and the only way that I feel like it should go is that I should pass that information on. And so Natasha knows she can get me at any time for any information or just not being sure about being on the local school councils. But thank you for wanting to be there. Thank you for wanting to be a part of the education of young people across this city. And just know that while it might seem mediocre or you might think that this is not an important job, it so much is. Thank you all for having me tonight. Run those elections.
Just realizing that I'm on mute. Forgive me. Thank you so much, Jeanette, for like just spreading your wisdom and really breaking down what the importance of being a local school council member is. So I'm excited to hear from the rest of our folks thanks folks for letting me know I was muted. I appreciate y'all. I see folks are joining in the room. This is really what we wanted as a community. So it's really exciting to see y'all out there. What I really want in terms of like for everyone that's here, this is an open space for folks to really talk about like why they're in this space for local school councils, like what radicalized them or what got them involved. This is oftentimes a thankless position. This is oftentimes one of those where you're impacting hundreds and thousands of people. So your decision making is really far reaching, and also it's going to be contentious. Like Jeanette was saying, it's not for the faint at heart. But at the end of the day, centering our students, our schools, and our families, I think we all end up on the right side of things. So listen, without further ado, I want to bring on, or I should say, introduce our next speaker, who is a youth leader, who's really been leading the way here in Chicagoland. Ling Young, who's, born and raised on the south side of Chicago, has been organizing since freshman year of high school and is a proud class of 2020 graduate of Hyde Park Academy. And really has answered the call anytime we've, had questions or needed a young person to like really give a perspective from their own voice. So Ling, I'm really happy to have you on with us this evening, and really the floor is yours. Please go ahead and educate us on why you care about LSC elections.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ling Young. I am a youth organizer at Stop Southside Together, Organizing for Power. Something that really radicalized me and made me get into organizing was my high school. It's the oldest school on the South Side, but it's not funded. It doesn't have the resources that the Hyde Park Day School right down the street from us has, or the lab school right behind us has. And this was some things that we saw in Hyde Park. So at the time, Rahm Emanuel was the mayor, and we were going back and forth, especially in talk about the CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement Ordinance. And we had taken a part in it as education. Education was just pretty much talking about Hyde Park because they were building this $1 million center right across the street from this high school. And so we had rats, roaches, alley cats. It was terrible. But this was something, but we had so much pride in our school, and we loved our school, even though for, the things that it didn't have. So we had talked to Rahm Emanuel about getting Hyde Park $40 million for construction and renovation. And that was how I kind of started getting really into the organizing deal. Then I started organizing for Police Free Schools and also the Trauma Center. But now I'm currently on Police Free Schools. And what pushed us to start working in the LSC was because Lori Lightfoot pretty much put the blame on the LSC and said, LSC are the ones that are supposed to vote on this. And so we had shifted our whole process to individually working on LSCs. And what really took me to Hyde Park was that I was a class of 2020, and seeing that I live right down the street. I'm in the boundaries, but my mother never got anything for voting. I never got anything for voting. And this was something that, as being a community member now, I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be a part of, fixing my school community, fixing the wrongs in our community and all the other stuff like that. So we decided to take to shift our strategy of Police Free Schools as working with LSCs as community members, or even running some of our people. Well, we can't run or campaign or run any people on the slate because I'm part of a nonprofit. Stop. But we work to educate people. So working as in doing workshops, forums. We just had our first LSC forum for Hyde Park Academy for Public Safety and Education. And which is some things that, especially because of Hyde Park having a dense police population, was the first thing that we wanted to work with, was getting the police out of schools. And when we are currently working with a lot of the teachers, a few teachers from Hyde Park, a few community members, a few parents, and also some alumni from there, to push the LSC to look at alternatives to policing, because schools spend almost $100,000 every day. $100,000 for the salary of a police officer, and Hyde Park not even having the equipped classrooms or even having equipped technology to teach us is a lot from us, asking us to, they're taking from our pockets, they're taking from us, they're taking from our opportunities of learning. And so working with the LSC, working to educate the LSC is pretty much what I do. I try to give them, instead of the broad thinking of Police Free Schools and thinking that, oh, we hate police and we're going to mount because of the uprising. No, this was always a current thing. I've always worked on Police Free Schools since my sophomore year in high school, and I just graduated. So this was something that we always wanted to, push through. But working with the LSCs and working with our community and working with our school was something that we kind of didn't do. And I think working with the LSCs and working with the school really made a difference in our community and also in the school environment. Being more involved, being more community involved. Stop was always inside of the building, but after it was time for us to go, we just had to go. So now just taking pride in our school, taking pride in our LSC, and just wanting people, educate people to vote. Is voting this Thursday. Please get out and vote. Look on the website, figure out your boundaries, and also look at the people that are running on the slate. See if these people are the people that you want in your community. or in your school community? Is these the people that you want around your children? Is these the people that you want around the staff and the teachers that's supposed to teach your children? And these were the kind of things that we have prepped parents, teachers, and staff on before voting. So yeah. Hello? Think I was done.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ling. I appreciate you for bringing the energy and just really a youth perspective of why, LSC elections are just so critically important and how it connects to what's happening, like really, literally real time in terms of student safety, student supports, and what young people, need in this moment. So I want to bring on our next, speaker who has really, just really energized LSCs in the community. And so Kelly Garcia is someone that many of you, if you're on social media, I'm pretty sure you've seen her tweets. Amid the last, I can't call it, but just it's been a while since we've seen such energy around like the intricate details of what's happening in LSC meetings at the school level. So Kelly, I'm so excited that you are here with us this evening. I know that you are a recent DePaul 2020 grad, a freelance journalist with bylines in the tribe. You're currently a civic reporting fellow for City Bureau covering Chicago's budget season. I know that you're also on the steering committee member and co-chair of the Education Committee for the 48th Ward Independent Political Organization, or IPO, also known as the 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me too. So yeah, like Natasha mentioned, I am a freelance reporter. I've been covering education since over the summer. And now I also currently organize with 48th Ward Independent Political Organization, 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice. So how I really got involved with local school councils was from my coverage of the school resource officers in Chicago public schools. So as many of you probably remember, over the summer, the Board of Education voted to not remove the school resource officers from schools. There were actually two votes. So one happened in June. And after they took that vote, they basically decided to allow local school councils to have that decision to either remove or keep the school resource officers in their school communities. And so what led to that, what happened after that basically was that we had almost 70 local school councils vote on whether or not to keep the school resource officers. I attended almost all of them, or I tried to. And then we saw at least like 19 schools who actually voted to remove the school resource officers. And so a lot of the things that I noticed during my coverage was that, one, student voice was being suppressed a lot of the times. And so I had the privilege and honor to meet a lot of youth organizers over the summer, many of whom were with Desi Youth Rising, the Police Free School Student Coalition, Good Kids Mad City, all of whom were doing amazing, fantastic work over the summer to organize to get cops out of their schools. But what we were seeing too is that local school councils, the high schools that were voting on this stuff, were lacking student representation, right? So as we know, high schools get to have at least one student representative on the local school council. But the challenge with that is that, over the summers, students are either graduating or, the local school council didn't necessarily make an effort to invite the student to these conversations, or there's a vacancy and nothing has been done to fill that vacancy for the student. And so student voice was basically gone from a lot of those conversations over the summer about whether or not to keep cops in the schools. So that really, bothered me. I'm a recent grad. I feel like I definitely align with students on this point. And so, I got to meet with a lot of youth organizers who were really advocating to get more student voice in the local school council. What I also noticed was a lack of transparency and accessibility with local school councils. So as you know, you've probably read a lot, there's a lot of violations for the Open Meetings Act. And so local school council members, just like any other governing body, have to follow the Open Meetings Act, which is a way of increasing transparency and accessibility for members of the community to be able to participate in these discussions. But a lot of local school council members, unfortunately, just are not aware of what Open Meetings Act is. And so what we saw, were, meetings that were happening with agendas not being posted, or, the minutes, so the notes that are being taken at the meetings were not being posted. And so people were unaware of what was happening, but also just unable to participate. Unfortunately, I also had an experience of being kicked out as a reporter during one of the open meetings. These are public meetings. So even if you're not a member of the local school council, you can still participate. And so I think that's definitely something that I hope people take away from this rally today, is that even if you're not running, right, even if you don't want to be on the council, you can still participate. You can still attend these meetings. That's why it's so important that local school councils follow Open Meetings Act and allow for more accessibility and transparency on these calls. So after my coverage over the summer, I then got more involved in my own community here in the 48th Ward. So I live in Uptown. I joined the independent political organization, 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice. And one of our pillars is education. We really care about having fully funded, equitable schools for our children here. And so one of the questions that we first started with was, who's on our local school council, right? What do they do? I live right next to Gowdy Elementary. And so something that I, began to get really curious about was, how are the local school council members, one, empowered to create change in their own school community, but also how are we addressing issues that impact the school community that is maybe outside of the classroom? So Uptown, unfortunately, is seeing a lot of gentrification in the area. So what we've been able to do is empower some of the members now who are in the local school council to be able to address some of those issues within their own school community. So at Gowdy Elementary, for example, there is now a housing committee that is working in tandem with the community in the area to be able to address how housing intersects, right, education, how that comes together to really impact the members of the school community. So I got really interested into that. I also just, began to get to know, who our local school council members were in other schools in our ward. Sen High School, for example, really, interesting school. What we saw there was also just a lot of student voice being suppressed. And so I began to get really, involved more with what were happening with the students there. There's a lot of youth organizers. There's a lot of students who are already involved, doing, a lot of great things for their own school community. One thing that I would encourage candidates who are running is to think about what are committees that you want to form. One tip that I would have is that, council members can form committees that can address issues that are, specific or temporary. So for example, a lot of local school councils have remote learning committees, or they have what we've been seeing a lot is racial equity committees or parent groups. You can also form student voice committees, so students can have more representation on the local school council as well. So that's something that we've been seeing a lot in the 48th Ward. It's just more increased, involvement with other members of the community who aren't necessarily a part of the local school council. So yeah, I think local school councils are a really great way of, bringing about change in your own school community. It's the largest governing body, right? I think it has 4,000 seats. It's probably the largest democratically elected body in the country. Local school council members are policymakers. You can create change in your own community. So I really encourage you all, even if you're not running, to stay engaged, stay informed, continue challenging the district, right? There's a lot of limitations, unfortunately, as to what local school council members can do, but there's also a lot of room to challenge that. So I encourage everyone to continue learning more and getting involved, and go vote in your elections if you can safely. Please do. So thank you again for having me. Oh, Natasha, you're on mute again.
Thank you. I hit it and it's not responding quick enough, but thank you for being here. I hope you can stick around for a little bit in case folks have some questions about your experience and what you saw. Thank you. And so next I'll introduce our next speaker, who is a current LSC chair, at least for the last, I believe, 2 school years. Wiley Johnson is a parent of CPS, student. He's an entrepreneur, a father of 3 CPS students, the chair, like I said, of a local school council, really involved with the school community. I know for the events that I've seen, I witnessed you, Wiley. If there was an event, you're there. If there's a cause to participate in, that you're there. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on today, because you are probably perhaps one of the most involved LSC chairs that I've seen. So Wiley, thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping you could spread some wisdom and knowledge of your experience that you've had over the last couple of years while you've been on the LSC.
Thank you, Natasha. As Natasha said, my name is Wiley Johnson. I am a parent rep at King College Prep. King College Prep is a selective enrollment school, predominantly Black selective enrollment school. It's the only exclusively predominantly Black selective enrollment school. It happens to be in the heart of the South Side of Chicago. Most of our students come from across the city. They're primarily low income, and I've been a member of the LSC since my daughter was a freshman, and my goal has been to work as hard as I possibly could to provide students at King College Prep the same quality education that many students in other communities are fortunate enough to have. As Natasha said, I have been the chair for the past 2 years, and to be perfectly honest, I've been fortunate enough to be able to stand on the shoulders of a lot of great, strong Black women like Natasha and others who, sort of paved the way for me before I arrived, and they are still willing to help in every way possible to see King, like I said, become one of the better selective enrollment schools in Chicago. So LSCs were created with the intent of improving academic achievement by giving parents and community residents unprecedented power to work to improve schools. Now, what I've noticed since I've been a member of the LSC is that for whatever reason, reasons, parents and community residents are relinquishing that power back to principals and other CPS people who are in power. And I think that's really unfortunate. So I am running on a slate with 3 other fantastic independent candidates at King College Prep. One of them is Tanika Reed. She is number 4 on our ballot. She works tirelessly to do all that she can to improve King College Prep. She is a former chair. She is a former chair of our PAC. And, I haven't seen many people work as hard and be willing to fight in whatever way possible to help our Jaguar community become better. Another candidate is Frances Newman. She is number 1 on our ballot. She is also a parent. She is a community activist. She has a very strong and powerful independent voice, and she has worked for decades to try to bring change in her community, and I'm honored to also run with her. And third and final candidate on our slate is Hershey Mallory. He is number 28. He is a former alum of King College Prep. Before he became King's College Prep, he is a community rep. He is very active in the community, and he is also a very strong independent voice. And that's one of the things that we bring, our platform brings. Our platform is student focused. It's tailored around rigorous instruction, community engagement, and administration accountability. And that's what we believe is very, very important in order to see not just King College, but to see schools across the city improve, is that you have to have independent voices who are willing to fight for the kids and for the community in order to improve schools. And that's what we bring to the table. So if you are in the area, if you're a parent in King College Prep, if you live in the area, I invite you to come out and support our slate on Thursday, November 9th. And that's all I have. Thanks for your time, Natasha.
Here we go again. I can't believe I keep doing that. It's like, look, okay, there we go. All I was getting at was thank you, Wiley. I realized that Wiley's audio was a little bit choppy, but hopefully that the message, got across, is that really to build empowering schools and communities and relationships is to be centered and to be focused in the way you move forward. And just mentioning that, really speaking to the power of like having a whole school relationship to make sure that LSCs are fully empowered is really exciting. So that's why I'm excited for our next speaker, who's an English and history teacher at Clemente Community Academy. Muiz has served as a delegate and a member of the PPLC at Clemente. If you all know that every school that has a powerful and engaged PPLC, that is a well-informed LSC in real time about the needs at the school. So I'm really excited for you to be here and bring some thoughts and momentum around what you think is important around LSC elections. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate that. In 2020, I think by the end of this year, our main phrase will be "you're on mute." And don't feel bad. Like some of my students will let me go on and they won't say I'm on mute. They're like, "We enjoyed it. You were quiet, and we were trying to guess what you were saying." So love the kids. Shout out to everybody at Clemente. So LSCs, I think it's important, right? A lot of people have said some incredible things today, and I'm trying to find words that will give you some different insights. But I think coming from a teacher perspective, right? Parents are the most crucial. Parents and students are incredibly crucial to our community. And Kelly hit on it, right? Those are voices that are often suppressed. But the LSC is supposed to be one of those areas where those voices get amplified and uplifted, right? And any school worth its rating, any opinionality about it needs to have the community engaged, right? And they need help. Right. And when we're asking people to join LSCs or run for LSCs, this is a chance really to make powerful, powerful changes. Right. I want you to think about schools. I want you to really think about schools. Right. We are beyond this antiquated idea that students can perform without stability at home. Students can perform, or our kids can just magically walk into buildings and, turn off whatever issues exist. That's not true. A school is tied directly to its community. A school in many instances is the life school of the community. And someone had mentioned about what has radicalized people before, right? And I remember being in the meetings regarding the 4 schools in Englewood that were closed down in 2017, right? And the outpouring of what the school meant to people, right? And I've been in schools that have been shuttered, and you kind of walk in and it's hard not to think about the fact that a gym, like of a shuttered school, this is where joy used to exist, right? Schools are not only places our kids go, but they're the focal point of our joy. They are food stability in a lot of areas. Try to find out in your local school how many meals a day they're providing during this pandemic, right? Because we don't have relief coming from up top. And if you are concerned about your community, you're concerned about not only the happenings of your students in school, but outside of school, why not get involved, right? Why not push your LSC to be more focused about the conditions your kids are going through? Because we all know sheltering in place or remote learning doesn't work for students who don't have a shelter, or it doesn't work for students who don't have access to high quality internet. And this is where spaces like the LSCs, where movements can begin. Because you got to start asking these questions. Why do our kids not have internet? Why are so many families in our neighborhood hungry, right? And what is Chicago Public Schools, which is supposed to be a refuge for our kids and families, what are they doing, right? And speaking as a Pakistani immigrant, someone who learned English in Chicago Public Schools, people who helped my father find ways to get his electricity back on in Chicago Public Schools, people who found ways to help my father in evenings take English classes, right? Teachers who stood with me every single day until my father could leave his job or my mom could leave her job and come pick me up. Sometimes that's 5, 6 o'clock, right? Our spaces, our schools are sacred spaces. Our schools can cultivate incredible human beings, and you see a few of them on these calls, right? And like, I'm trying to make a little bit of the more emotional plea to you, because I'm saying we got to fight for our schools, right? I'm thinking really heavily about the fact that I could have been back in a public school, and you've seen COVID trackers and you've seen what's been happening in these casings. If the parents didn't show up for teachers, if parents didn't go into surveys and say, this is not safe, right? And we got to keep pushing that movement to taking back our schools and taking into consideration, right? Like a school like ours, why are 26% of your students in diverse learning? And why is CPS starving them and not giving those students the resources they need? Why are 16% of your students in STLS, meaning students in temporary living situations? And what are we doing as a school? How are we using our budget? How are we amplifying our voice to make sure those students are forgotten? Today, we learned through Chalkbeat that many of the schools that are being hit, right, with severe amounts of students dropping out are the poorest schools in our community, right? Where are we at that call? And where are we in terms of holding people accountable for not caring about our marginalized and hyper-marginalized communities? This is the power of the LSC. This is democracy in progress, right? Getting on the LSC, fighting for students and their families to have a place, fighting for the school to be a central community, and fighting for the school to be an organizing hub. These are things we can accomplish through LSCs, right? People really, really thought, and I think Kelly hit it on the head, that they were going to get through this SRO process, that we somehow are dumb, right? And we don't seem to recognize that our children are living in very traumatic areas, are going through trauma every single day, and that there's money that could change their lives, right? They really thought, if we go to the LSCs, it's going to get buried. They're not going to push back, right? And look what LSCs did. Look what communities did when they organized and they amplified parent voice, community rep voice, student voice, right? And they demanded CPS to start thinking differently, whether that came from restorative processes coming in the system or whether that's come from looking at serious situations like how we fund our schools, not even at a local level, but at a higher level, right? This is where fights can start. This is where small things can change somebody's lives, right? This is where you could put students on the course to finding and recognizing their potential, right? These are our spaces. And this is coming from someone who saw people weeping at school closures, right? And I always think about this, and I always think about Rahm Emanuel and anybody who's propagating school closures or impacting schools or saying schools are not effective. And think about how many children love their schools. How many children love the people within their schools? How many schools are feeding children, are feeding communities, right? Those different things. And this is a really seminal moment in Chicago right now. And if you think I'm playing, look at the amount of noise coming around people wanting to get involved in this fight, right? And if you love your community and if you love your young people, why not get involved in the LSC? Those are the points I'm asking, and I know I'm asking a lot of questions. Somewhere there's a Clemente student watching and being like, this is just like class and my head is hurting already. But this is the type of stuff I'm asking you to think about, right? What can LSCs do? How can they ensure principals are making the right decisions at school? How can they listen to teacher voice? How can they connect what happens in the classroom to what's going on outside for responsive teaching, for socio-emotional supports, for efforts that build in ways that our students are no longer criminalized in our school, but they're loved and cared for, right? And they're sheltered in our schools. Those are the things you could do. It's not just, of course, budget is important, curriculum is important, but think about the impact you can if we start amplifying the issues that exist in our city as a microcosm of what exists in our schools. So please, I'm encouraging you all, please get involved, please go vote, please start attending LSC meetings, even after the election's over, right? If you show up and you show your voice and you show that your school, your kids, your community can't be neglected, guess what? They're not going to neglect it because we've got the power. So please consider running. Please consider, in the future running. Please consider definitely voting. But please make a commitment tonight to start going to your LSC meetings. All right? Appreciate y'all.
I am not on mute. Thank you so much for that. Man, I knew you were on fire. So yes, everything that you just said is just on point. I am, curious for those that have been kind of listening to each other. This is an opportunity for you all to take maybe one more minute to maybe, have one more round of a thought that you'd like to share, maybe a final thought that you thought of that you'd like to lift up. I will always start with the youth. Ling, did you have another thought that you wanted to share in a minute or less? You're on mute, Ling. You're on mute. Oh, it looks like we lost Ling. All good. Maybe she'll be able to join back in. Kelly or Wiley, do you have any final thoughts in a minute or less that you'd like to share before we move into some more recent updates?
Yeah, for sure. I can share something really quick. Something I would add and encourage candidates to think about too is how we are providing translation services. I recognize that there's a huge portion of families in Chicago public schools who are unable to participate because they just are not, they don't have the resources, like CPS isn't providing those resources to be able to understand what's happening at these local school council meetings. I think about schools over the summer that didn't have translators at the local school council meetings, agendas and notes of the meeting that weren't being translated for families who, don't speak English. And so I'd encourage candidates to think about that, how to make those meetings more accessible. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, Wiley, and then Ling. Any final thoughts?
I am encouraged by the passion of students like Ling, people like Kelly Garcia, and teachers like the one they have over at Clemente. We need people to be involved in our school communities. We need people to be passionate in our school community. We need people whose sole focus while they're there is to fight for our kids. And seeing this level of engagement by the people in this panel gives me hope. And once again, Tasha, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Ling, you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes, just want people to understand that this fight is not something of a figure of our imagination. It's schools around the country in the same state that we live in that have equal opportunities. Everybody across the board has access to equal education. Chicago shouldn't be one of those places. So let's fight together to make sure we have equal education for all, and to make sure that when we need to reallocate resources back into our school.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So I know that we recently hosted an event that was really geared towards the candidates who have a lot of concerns. I can just say, amid COVID-19, communication has not been the best. Amid everything that's going on, that's polarized in the world, it's kind of hard, to kind of bring in this LSC conversation that has really been, in a way that we think should be maximized. So I really want to just share some of the things that we talked about while we were in that candidate session recently. Again, we got a lot of questions. It's really because of the interaction that we have with 2020 candidates that help us to see the blind spots. And so we've partnered with, many partner organizations to help write strongly worded letters to the district. I think we're on our fourth. And what we've gotten out of that each time is a different step forward in terms of making things right. So really quickly, for parents that have, received the mail-in ballot, this is a hybrid year of voting where parents were able to receive a mail-in ballot. The instructions on the mail-in ballot tells you that you must have that ballot back at the school by October 18th or 19th. As a reflection of one of our letters, we thought that because we already know that there's a national lag or slowdown in mail, so we were able to get them to push that deadline that everyone can send their ballot as long as it's post-dated by the 18th or 19th of November and received by November 30th. So what is on the ballot tells you must have it to the school by 18th or the 19th. You now have until November 30th in order for that ballot to be counted. Now, I want to be clear about that. If you are at an elementary school, it must be postmarked by the 18th of November. If you're at a high school, it must be postmarked by the 19th of November. So I know we're in a stay-at-home order here in the city of Chicago. If you don't want to go out and vote in person, you can do that. Again, get it in the mail by those dates and that ballot will count. There's a lot of questions that we've been fielding in terms of traditional LSCs and appointed LSCs. A lot of folks are not really clear in terms of what that looks like. So I want to be as brief as possible, but to be as clear to say that if your school is a traditional LSC, they're voted on and elected by votes cast by parents of children in the school and community members who live in the school's attendance boundary or voting district. Some of our schools are selective enrollment or have special voting districts, so it's a little bit wider than the normal attendance boundary. If you're at an appointed LSC or board of governors, those are schools that have experienced some sort of school action within the last, say, 20 years. So we have schools that don't have a fully empowered LSC, or it's a little bit different in how they're voted. At ALSC schools, the candidates are voted on by parents and parents only at that school by a non-binding preference poll. And so there's a link here that I'm going to put into the chat, which essentially lets you know where or what type of school you'll be voting. And I think that's useful for those that might not be aware of like how they vote or what type of schools they vote. As long as you're at a traditional LSC school, remember, parents and community members can vote. Those at ALSC schools, you're probably already familiar with this, but you would only have parents that vote. Community don't vote in those schools. We've gotten questions from the community in terms of, where can I vote? I'm not sure. Folks who are just not in the school community. I want to get a link here in the chat that really tells you plug in your address. It's going to tell you all of the schools that you're able to vote. Now, for me, I thought that I was only going to have 2 schools. There are actually 6 schools that I can vote in as a community member and vote on parents and community members. And so this link will be useful for folks who are not sure around where they can vote. I'm going to grab that link here now. Where they can vote based on their home address. After that, we also have fielded a lot of questions in terms of like poll watchers. How can people who are interested in engaging, this is a volunteer position, how can they help out on the day of to assist to make sure that this is a fair and transparent election that we can all have faith in? Every LSC candidate gets to have 3 poll watcher credential forms. So essentially each candidate can have 3 people act as a poll watcher on the day of elections. Now, if you're familiar with municipal voting, it's no different. Essentially, a poll watcher can be there from the time polls open, which is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then those people can essentially act on behalf of the candidate and to just make sure that it's a fair process throughout the day. What we're being told now, because the deadline has changed to allow the mail-in ballots, is that all of the voting, or we believe that all of the vote tallies for both in-person voting and allowing that November 30th mail-in deadline, is that all of the voting is going to happen on December 1st. There'll be more information that's going to come out about that. So I'm sharing with the public to say we won't know who won the LSC elections until December 1st. I hope that's clear for folks. And if there are any questions out there, like please post them in the chat and we can kind of discuss that. In terms of voting in person, CPS has opened up what's considered a safety health screener. So for everyone who plans to come into the school that plans to vote, you're going to need to complete this health screener, wear a cloth mask, practice social distancing, have your temperature checked. It's a minor thing now. We should pretty much be used to that as a community. So there's a little bit of safety there that says, please go out and vote in person. If you're a parent that has not received your ballot, please go out in person and vote. This LSC election season is critically important for a lot of our schools that are trying to move in the right direction. We've seen a lot of interest this year where we hadn't before. There's an uptick in interest in terms of like, what would you call that? Interest in people running for, previous seats that sit vacant. And one of the things that I think is really important that we don't talk about enough is like why it's important to make sure that LSCs have their, their full capacity. Their full capacity helps the LSC make sure that they can meet and have the minimum quorum to do school business. So it's really important that we kind of remember why we're here, why our students and schools need us on the other side of COVID-19. I feel like this is really where centering young people, like Lynn was talking about, everyone really that's been on the panel today. We're going to need our schools to be welcome spaces for our young people. The LSCs that are seated and elected in this cycle are going to help make those decisions. Is there anyone out there that, again, has any other comments? Is there anything that you think we should share before we start to check the, our time here? We wanted to make this a short 1-hour show so that we could just really build the momentum and go from here. So any final thoughts or things that you all would like to mention for day of elections? Someone here in the chat is saying that some of the parents are not registered in Aspen. Again, so that's a parent who most likely did not receive a mail-in ballot. And so in that case, that's why, I would highly recommend that parent, if at all possible, to vote in person. Again, I received my ballot on Friday. So it seems like they're kind of trickling in. If you haven't received that ballot by tomorrow, I would definitely say to vote in person. One of the question here is, where do I get those, the forms for the poll watchers? So if you're a LSC candidate, you should have received your poll watcher form at your candidate forum. If you didn't, because it was virtual and it's just a lot of new processes this year, you can email the school principal or LSC election coordinator, which should be school-based. It's usually the school clerk, or someone that's appointed as a designee for this for this position. They should be able to send you the poll watcher forms. If they're not going to email them, they should make a coordination with you to pick them up in person. Great question. And so, yeah, I want to, really lift up again that we have, a myriad of resources. We're, helping support folks to make sure that they're good to go as, the days are leading up to their LSC elections. Let's see, we have one more question that's coming up here, is how can people see who's on the ballot for schools in our community without going directly to the school's website? That's a great question, Angel. So a lot of schools, some schools, our most affluent schools, our schools with a lot of resources, have a great showing on their website in terms of like who's running. So you can go onto the school's website, click on, LSC candidates. A lot of them recorded their candidate forums and have made that available. But if you don't see that, it does require you to, contact the school, email the school principal, call and say, hey, I'm interested in voting in the upcoming elections. I don't see this information publicly. How can I get information about the candidates? Most schools have at least a candidate statement about the why a person is running, right? And so that should give you some, an idea of who you might want to vote for. And if you're on social media, a lot of candidates and slates are hosting events. I was on with Ling and her awesome event that she hosted on Saturday, which had a lot of community interest, where she was really setting the guardrails on like, hey, if you want to be in this school, no, I'm kidding, but really just setting the tone and having a community conversation in terms of what it looks like to be at a school and to be deeply invested. So again, if you don't have that information, really just kind of search online, search Facebook about the school name and see if something comes up. A lot of slates are posting their info online. And so just kind of stay tuned to raise your hand. We are, if you're not already connected with us by email, if you're not connected with us, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are planning to support candidates in the next coming days, and really want to lift up the fact that Chicago Lawyers Committee is committed to making sure that that day of elections is representative of fair and transparent. They're going to have a hotline. If you don't already have that, we'll have it posted on our Raise Your Hand pages here in about the next 30 minutes. Which really will give you, and if you're not already connected, on their Twitter and Facebook, they have the hotline number and an email where you can contact them for day of support. And a lot of that will be if there's something suspicious that's going on. If you're pulling up curbside and not able to get an election judge to come out and support you, those are the types of things that you would want to let them know that's going on day of. So I feel like this has been a great hour. Thank you so much, y'all, for being on and taking your time out. I feel like this has been, what we need in our community to keep spreading the word in the next coming days to make sure we get out the vote.
Thank you so much. Also, shout out to Raise Your Hand. Y'all are doing really great work and advocacy around local school council. So really, thank you so much for your hard work on that.
Appreciate that. All right, folks. Well, we are at an hour. So we're going to say peace, be safe, take care of one another, support one another. I know LSCs are oftentimes contentious, but on the other side of that is the right thing that's going to happen for the students, families, and our schools. Be well, be in touch, and take care.